Thank you for joining this biology session. We'll be continuing with Chapter 26, Animal Evolution and Diversity. We've already done 26.1 on invertebrates, and we'll be doing 26.2 and 3 in this video. So Chapter 26.2 is Chordate Evolution and Diversity. Chordates are animals that have a spinal cord. Chordata is a phylum, and it can be divided into 5 classes: mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, and fish. We often call these animals vertebrates, but that is not technically true in a few cases, which we'll talk about in a minute. So chordates is more accurate. The first type of chordates to evolve were the ancestors of modern tunicates and lancelets. Lancelets are these tiny little fishes, and they're both non-vertebrate chordates, meaning they have a spinal cord, but they don't have any vertebrae. And tunicates are especially weird. Tunicates only share the characteristics of chordates as larvae. So a larva of a tunicate does have a spinal cord and it's able to move around, but then they go through a metamorphosis and their adult phases actually resemble something more like sponges. They're attached to the ocean floor, they don't move around, they don't have a spinal cord. So they're kind of an interesting segue kind of animal where only one phase of the life has the spinal cord. So we'll be looking at the evolution of different vertebrate groups and the traits that mattered, that evolved, that were important. And so once we had chordates, spinal cords, the next thing to really matter was evolving vertebrae around the spinal cord to protect it. And the first group to have this was the jawless fishes. They had skeletons made of cartilage, not bone, and no jaws or teeth. And this phyla has continued to evolve over millions of years and lives on in the form of hagfish and lampreys, both of which are pretty much the worst. They have teeth despite not having jaws. Lampreys are parasites that attach themselves to bigger prey, use this horror show of a mouth to make the prey bleed, and suck the blood out. If those don't horrify you enough, you could also pause this and Google hagfish slime. The next trait to develop were jaws and fins. So fish that developed at this point still didn't have bones, but they had jaws and they have paired fins. So paired appendages where one on the left matches the one on the right. And these developed in today's sharks, rays, and skates, which still have skeletons made of cartilage, not bone. The next major trait to develop was bony skeletons. So bony fish developed into 2 groups. You have the ray-finned fish, which became most of the fish that you now know of. If you're going fishing or you're eating fish for dinner, you're looking at ray-finned fishes. They have thin bones that hold the skin of their fins in shape. The other variety is lobe-finned fishes. And those evolved larger bones that supported thick, fleshy fins. And they were able to be a bit more supportive. So they kind of evolved in a different direction. So they've got these fleshy fins, and then there's a version called lungfishes, which actually developed lungs as well as gills. So lungfishes have structures so that they can breathe air. So one group of these lungfishes could breathe air, and they developed their fins into more like limbs that could support the thick bodies and kind of help them to crawl around. So they could crawl around the ocean floor, and because they had lungs, they could also crawl up onto land. So the next major challenge for the development of vertebrates was gaining the ability to live on land. So, like we said, some of these lobe-finned fishes had lungs and could walk, and in some of them, the lobe-finned fishes, their fins eventually evolved into legs, and as we said, some of them evolved lungs. How they were now able to get around on land, walk around, find food up there. However, leaving water behind wasn't completely an option yet because it was needed for reproduction. So amphibians are animals that developed so that their adult form can live on land and breathe air, but they must lay their eggs in the water and have a larval form that lives in the water until they can go through metamorphosis. So we have our common modern amphibians are frogs and toads and salamanders. So you have a tadpole that is the offspring that lives in the water, and then it goes through metamorphosis and becomes a frog. And you've got similar things with salamanders and toads. Okay, so then the next step was, how do we solve this problem? We have animals living on land, but they have to go back to water to reproduce. How can we have reproduction without water? So reptiles solved this problem. Reptiles solve this problem of requiring water for reproduction by developing amniotic eggs. These are eggs that have a shell for protection and membranes inside that shell that keep them from drying out, and this allows the eggs to be laid on land. Reptiles also have scaly skin that doesn't require them to stay moist, unlike frogs and some other amphibians. And so reptiles are able to live on land for their entire lives. We group birds here too because birds are a modern class of animals that evolved from reptiles, specifically from a group of feathered dinosaurs. So birds have feathers and lightweight bones for flying, and it's also important to know they're endothermic. They can keep their body temperature stable, unlike most reptiles and unlike amphibians and fish, which require another heat source to stay warm. Okay, so kind of parallel is the development of mammals. So mammals developed from a different group of reptiles than birds did. So you'll see the um, reptiles branched off this way and led to our modern turtles and tortoises, snakes, lizards, crocodiles, and birds. And then a separate branch led from reptiles to mammals. So characteristics of mammals, they are also endotherms, so they can regulate their own body temperature. They breathe air, they have four-chambered hearts, they have hair or fur, and they produce milk for their young. I think it's important to note that there's some mammals that live in the ocean, whales and dolphins, can't breathe underwater though. They have to surface to breathe air. And it's understood that mammals developed on land, but the ancestors of whales and dolphins moved back into the ocean and began readapting to that lifestyle of living in the water. And our last section is on specifically the evolution of primates. So, what is a primate? They are a type of mammal. They include lemurs, monkeys, apes, and humans. So, some characteristics of primates are binocular vision, which means both eyes are on the front of the face instead of on the side, which gives us good depth perception. Arms that can rotate at the shoulder and strong collarbones, which are adaptations for climbing trees. Long fingers and toes that can hold on to things, and a large cerebrum in the brain. So there are three groups of primates. One group is the lemurs and lorises, which are grouped together, then the tarsiers, and then the anthropoids. So the rest of this chapter, lemurs, tarsiers, anthropoids, the rest of this chapter is focusing on the anthropoids. Anthropoid ancestors were split up when the continents separated 45 million years ago. Those that ended up in the Western Hemisphere evolved into the group called the New World monkeys. These are monkeys that live in the Central and South America, and they have a prehensile tail, meaning their tail can wrap around the branches and hold on like an extra hand, like you see with this spider monkey here. Now, on the other side of the world, when continents split apart, those in Asia and Africa do not have a prehensile tail. So some evolved into monkeys known as the Old World monkeys, and others evolved into the hominoids, also called the great apes. Hominoids includes gibbons, orangutans, gorillas, chimpanzees, and humans. Now, the branch of hominoids that led to humans is the hominins. It's important to realize that humans did not evolve from monkeys or from chimpanzees. Monkeys split up from the apes much earlier, and while humans and chimps share a common ape ancestor, the evolution branched off in different directions. So you can see down here there was a common ancestor that was not any of these. It was earlier, and one branch led to chimpanzees, and then another branch of evolution led through lots of other phases and lots of other organisms before it got to humans. Many hominins exist along this path from those ape ancestors to humans. Studying the changes in the hominin fossils over time shows changes in the legs, hip, and back that allowed later species to walk on two legs, and the evolution of an opposable thumb, which is great for using tools. Meanwhile, the brains grew larger as the hominins evolved. And it's important to realize that not all hominins are human ancestors. Many branches of this evolutionary tree died out. So you can see that over here, um, all of these that I'm underlining are hominins that evolved and then died out. And none of those are ancestors of humans. They're just branches that went a separate way. But then on the way to humans, we also had some other hominins that they have died out now, but they evolved into different groups, eventually leading to humans. And humans' scientific name is Homo sapiens, so it's important to realize Homo is the genus and sapiens in the species. So there are other hominins that are in this gene of Homo genus. So you can see these four, Homo habilis, Homo erectus, Homo neanderthalis, and Homo sapiens. We are all in the same genus. So those four are very closely related. There is some debate on when and where Homo sapiens developed, but the science strongly points to this theory that Homo sapiens developed in Africa and then spread around the world, replacing other hominins that had already lived in those areas. And other species in the Homo genus lived at the same time as Homo sapiens. For example, both Neanderthals and Homo sapiens lived in Western Asia together for thousands of years, and in parts of Europe together as well. Neanderthals died out about 24,000 years ago, leaving humans as the only hominins on the planet. So I just want to review this classification again. So these are all primates, and then these are all anthropoids. Okay, so monkeys and all the great apes, they're all called anthropoids. This smaller group is the hominoids, also called the great apes. So gibbons, orangutans, gorillas, chimpanzees, and humans. And only the branch of great apes that leads to humans is called the hominins. And in this case, it's only showing humans because humans are the only species left. But there were other hominine species that existed and died out. So that brings us to the end of this chapter. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact an instructor.